Maya Chen loved her afternoon walks through the abandoned industrial district. At 12 years old, she was supposed to stay closer to home, but the rusted factories and overgrown lots held more adventure than the sterile suburban streets where she lived. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders as she picked her way through the debris, containing her usual supplies. A peanut butter sandwich, apple juice box, her sketchbook, and the leftover chicken strips from lunch that she hadn't finished. The September sun cast long shadows between the skeletal remains of buildings, and Maya hummed quietly to herself as she explored. She had discovered this place 6 months ago when her family moved to the colony world of Kepler 442b, and it had become her secret refuge. The adults called it an industrial graveyard, but to Maya, it was a playground of mysteries and hidden corners where she could draw and think without anyone telling her to be more careful or asking where she was going. She was sketching the way afternoon light filtered through a broken warehouse window when she heard it. The sound was unlike anything she had encountered before, a low, rumbling wheeze that seemed to come from the earth itself. Maya froze, her pencil halfway through, shading a beam of sunlight. The sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by what sounded like massive objects scraping against concrete. Every instinct told her to run. The colony had briefed all residents about the local wildlife, and while most of Kepler 442b's creatures were harmless, there were still unknowns. But Maya had always been curious to a fault, and the sound seemed less threatening and more sad, desperate, even. She closed her sketchbook and crept toward the source of the noise, moving between chunks of fallen concrete and rusted machinery. The sound grew louder as she approached what had once been the main assembly floor of some long-defunct factory. Most of the roof had collapsed years ago, leaving the space open to the sky and filled with rubble and wild vegetation. When Maya peered around the corner of a massive support pillar, her breath caught in her throat. The creature before her was magnificent and terrible. Even lying on its side among the debris, it was easily the size of a small building. Its body was serpentine, covered in scales that had once been a deep emerald, but were now dull and brittle-looking. 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws the size of Maya's entire body, were tucked beneath its frame. Wings that could have blotted out the sun were folded tight against its back, and a long, elegant neck supported a head that was unmistakably draconic. But this was no healthy dragon from the fairy tales Maya's grandmother used to tell. The creature's ribs showed clearly beneath its scaled hide. Its eyes, large and intelligent, were sunken in their sockets. The magnificent head that should have been held high with pride rested against the concrete, too heavy for its weakened neck to support. Maya had never seen anything like it, but she recognized hunger when she saw it. The same look had been in her neighbor's dog's eyes last winter, when it had been lost for 3 days. The same desperate exhaustion her little brother had shown when he'd been sick with fever. The dragon's enormous eye suddenly focused on her, and Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run. Every survival instinct screamed at her to flee. But the eye that looked at her wasn't filled with the predatory hunger she might have expected. Instead, it held an intelligence that was almost human, and something that looked suspiciously like embarrassment. The great head lifted slightly from the concrete, a movement that clearly cost the creature tremendous effort. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth the size of sword blades, and Maya took an involuntary step backward. But instead of a roar or threat, what emerged was a series of complex sounds, clicks, whistles, and low rumbles that had a distinctly linguistic quality. Maya didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She had heard it before, from her little brother, when he was too proud to ask for help but desperately needed it. From her grandfather before he admitted he couldn't manage the farm alone anymore. It was the sound of someone swallowing their pride to ask for something they needed to survive. The dragon's eyes moved to Maya's backpack, and then back to her face. It made the sounds again, softer this time, and Maya could have sworn she heard a pleading quality in the alien syllables. "You're hungry," she said. And though she didn't expect the creature to understand English, its massive head moved in what looked remarkably like a nod. Maya's mind raced. This was clearly a predator. something that could tear her apart without effort. But it was also clearly dying. And it had approached her, a small human child, for help. The situation was so surreal that Maya felt oddly calm, as if she had stepped outside normal reality into one of her daydreams. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out the container of leftover chicken strips. They were cold and probably not appetizing by human standards, but they were food. The dragon's enormous eyes tracked every movement as Maya opened the plastic container. "I don't know if you can eat this," Maya said, holding up one of the strips, "but it's all I have." She had expected to need to throw the food or place it on the ground. But the dragon did something that surprised her. It lowered its great head until its snout was only a few feet from where she stood, and opened its mouth slightly. The gesture was so clearly an invitation that Maya found herself stepping forward before she could think better of it. Up close, the dragon's scales were even more obviously dulled by malnutrition, and Maya could see that several were loose or missing entirely. The creature's breath was warm but not unpleasant. It smelled like ozone and something faintly metallic. Maya reached out and placed the chicken strip on the dragon's tongue, which was surprisingly soft and warm. The dragon closed its mouth carefully, and Maya saw the muscles in its throat work as it swallowed. The massive eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, they held an expression that Maya was certain was gratitude. She fed the creature the remaining chicken strips one by one. It was barely a snack for something so enormous, but the dragon accepted each piece with the same careful gentleness, never making any movement that might frighten her. When the container was empty, Maya sat back on her heels and really looked at the creature. Despite its weakened state, she could see the intelligence in its eyes, the way it held itself with dignity even while lying on debris. This wasn't just an animal driven by hunger, this was a thinking being, maybe as smart as any human. "What are you?" Maya asked softly. "Where did you come from?" The dragon regarded her for a long moment, then began to make those linguistic sounds again. This time, though, they came slower, more deliberately. Maya realized it was trying to communicate with her, possibly even attempting to learn her language. She pointed to herself. "Maya," she said clearly. Then she pointed to the dragon and raised her eyebrows in question. The creature's head tilted slightly, considering. Then it made a sound that was different from the others, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from its very core. "Vethrakis," it said. The word clearly foreign, but unmistakably a name. "Vethrakis," Maya repeated, and the dragon's eyes brightened noticeably at hearing its name spoken by human lips. Maya looked at her empty backpack and then back at Vethrakis. The small amount of food she had given him was clearly insufficient, but it was a start. The dragon was watching her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as hope. "I'll come back tomorrow," she promised. Not sure if Vethrakis could understand, but feeling like she needed to say it anyway. "I'll bring more food. I'll bring more food." As if the creature did understand, its great head lowered in what could only be described as a grateful bow. Maya gathered her things and stood to leave, but something made her turn back. "Why did you ask me? Why did you ask me?" she said. "There are adults, people bigger than me who might have more food. Why ask a kid?" Vethrakis tilted his massive head and made a series of soft sounds that Maya didn't understand. But somehow, looking into those ancient, intelligent eyes, she got the impression that maybe her size hadn't mattered. Maybe the dragon had seen something else. Something about her willingness to approach, instead of flee, her immediate response to help, instead of harm. As Maya picked her way back through the industrial ruins, her mind buzzed with questions and possibilities. She had no idea what Vethrakis was or where he had come from, but she knew she couldn't let him starve. The problem was figuring out how to help him without alerting the adults. If they found out about Vethrakis, they might panic. They might try to capture him or drive him away, and in his weakened state, that could kill him. The walk home seemed shorter than usual. Maya's thoughts consumed by planning. She would need more food, much more, and she would need to be careful about how she acquired it. She could save portions from her own meals, but that wouldn't be nearly enough for a creature the size of Vethrakis. She would need to be creative. When Maya reached her family's modest home in the suburban section of the colony, she found her parents in the kitchen preparing dinner. Her father, Dr. James Chen, was a xenobiologist who had been part of the original survey team for Kepler 442b. Her mother, Elena, was an agricultural engineer working on optimizing food production for the growing colony. "There's my wanderer," Elena said with a smile as Maya dropped her backpack by the door. "Find anything interesting on your adventure today?" Maya hesitated for just a moment. The urge to tell her parents about Vethrakis was strong. They were good people who might want to help. But she also knew they were scientists first, and the discovery of an intelligent alien species would trigger protocols and procedures that might not be in Vethrakis's best interest. "Just the usual stuff," Maya said, which was technically true. "Mom, do we have any extra food I could take on my walks? Sometimes I get hungry when I'm out exploring." "Of course, sweetheart," Elena said. "I'll pack you some extra sandwiches and fruit. Though you know the rules about staying safe out there." "I know, I'm careful," Maya assured her. And she was. Just perhaps not in the way her parents imagined. That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the encounter. Part of her wondered if she had dreamed the whole thing, but she could still smell the ozone scent of Vethrakis's breath, could still see those intelligent, desperate eyes. Whatever he was, wherever he had come from, he was real, and he needed help. The next morning, Maya made sure to eat only half her breakfast, carefully wrapping the rest in a napkin when her parents weren't looking. She did the same with lunch, and asked for extra portions that she could save for later. Her mother seemed pleased that Maya was taking more interest in having proper nutrition during her explorations. The walk back to the industrial district seemed to take forever. Maya found herself walking faster and faster, worried that Vethrakis might have moved on, or worse, that he might have died during the night. She had read about malnutrition in humans. It could shut down vital organs if it went on too long. She had no idea how alien biology worked, but the principle was probably similar. When Maya reached the collapsed factory, she called out softly, "Vethrakis? Are you here?" There was a moment of silence, and then she heard the slow scraping of massive claws against concrete. The dragon's head appeared from behind a pile of rubble, and Maya felt a relief so strong it made her knees weak. Vethrakis looked no better than he had the day before, but he was alive and alert. "I brought food," Maya said, hurrying over with her backpack full of carefully saved portions. She had managed to accumulate 2 sandwiches, an apple, some crackers, and a packet of dried meat that was supposed to be for emergency situations. Vethrakis lowered his head in that same careful gesture, and Maya began feeding him piece by piece. It was still pitifully little for a creature his size, but she could see that every bite was precious to him. As she fed him, Maya found herself talking. She told Vethrakis about her family, about the colony, about her school and her friends. The dragon listened with obvious attention, his great head tilted slightly as if he was trying to understand not just her words but her meaning. When the food was gone, Vethrakis began to make his linguistic sounds again. This time, Maya paid closer attention to the patterns and rhythms. There was definitely structure to it, grammar, syntax, the building blocks of language. Vethrakis was trying to talk to her. Maya pointed to various objects around them, rocks, metal, her backpack, and said the English words clearly. Vethrakis repeated each one in his deep, rumbling voice. The human sounds strange but recognizable coming from his alien throat. "Rock," Maya said, holding up a piece of concrete. "Rock," Vethrakis repeated, the word rolling through his throat like distant thunder. "Food," Maya said, holding up her empty lunch container. "Food," Vethrakis said, and his eyes seemed to brighten with understanding. They continued this way for nearly an hour, building a basic, shared vocabulary. Vethrakis was an incredibly quick learner, and Maya began to suspect that his species might have natural linguistic abilities that far exceeded human capabilities. As the afternoon wore on, Maya realized she needed to head home soon, or risk questions from her parents. But leaving Vethrakis behind was becoming harder each day. She could see him growing weaker despite her efforts to feed him, and she knew that the small amounts of food she could smuggle to him weren't enough to sustain something his size. I need to go, Maya said reluctantly. But I'll come back tomorrow, I promise. Vethrakis nodded his understanding, then made a sound she hadn't heard before, a low, musical note that seemed to convey both gratitude and farewell. As Maya walked home, she wrestled with a growing certainty that she needed help. Vethrakis was dying, and she couldn't save him alone. But who could she trust? Who would see him as she did, not as a potential threat or scientific specimen, but as a person in need of help? The answer came to her as she reached her front door. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who lived next door, had been a veterinarian before retiring to the colony. She was kind, practical, and had always treated Maya like an adult capable of making her own decisions. If anyone might understand the situation and help without automatically involving the authorities, it would be her. Maya spent the evening planning her approach. Tomorrow, she would take the biggest risk yet. She would tell someone else about Vethrakis and hope that her trust wasn't misplaced. Mrs. Patterson was tending to her small garden when Maya approached her the next morning. The older woman looked up from her tomato plants with a warm smile, her weathered hands still steady despite her 73 years. Good morning, Maya. You're up early today. Maya had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head, but now that the moment was here, her carefully planned words seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. She took a deep breath and decided to trust her instincts. Mrs. Patterson, if you found an animal that was hurt and starving, but it was different from anything people had seen before, would you help it even if other people might be scared? The older woman set down her gardening tools and gave Maya her full attention. Her blue eyes, still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, studied Maya's face with the kind of careful observation that came from a lifetime of reading both animals and people. That's quite a hypothetical question, dear. Are we talking about something specific? Maya's resolve wavered for a moment. Once she told Mrs. Patterson about Vethrakis, there would be no taking it back. But the image of the dragon's weakening form pushed her forward. It's not hypothetical, Maya said quietly. And it's not exactly an animal either. It's intelligent. Like us. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't immediately dismiss Maya's words as imagination. Instead, she gestured toward her porch chairs. Why don't you sit down and tell me about it? For the next 30 minutes, Maya explained everything. She told Mrs. Patterson about finding Vethrakis, about their attempts to communicate, about his obvious intelligence and desperate hunger. She watched the older woman's face carefully for signs of disbelief or alarm, but Mrs. Patterson listened with the same careful attention she might give to a complex veterinary case. When Maya finished, Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the morning sky. You know, Maya, in my 40 years as a veterinarian, I learned that intelligence comes in many forms. I've seen dolphins solve problems that stumped graduate students, and I've watched elephants mourn their dead with a grief that was entirely human. If this creature you've found is truly intelligent, then you're right, it deserves help, regardless of what species it belongs to. Maya felt a surge of relief so strong she almost started crying. Then you'll help me? I'll help you help it, Mrs. Patterson corrected gently. But first, I need to see this Vethrakis for myself, and we'll need to be very careful about how we proceed. Discovery of a new intelligent species isn't something that can be kept quiet forever. And when the news does get out, we want to make sure it's handled in a way that protects your friend. An hour later, Maya led Mrs. Patterson through the industrial district, her heart pounding with nervous energy. She had filled her backpack with every scrap of food she could gather, including a large portion of leftover roast that Mrs. Patterson had contributed. Vethrakis might be frightened at first, Maya warned as they approached the collapsed factory. He's only ever seen me before. I understand, dear. I'll let you make the introductions, Maya called out softly as they reached the debris field. Vethrakis? I brought a friend. She wants to help. The response was immediate, the sound of movement from deeper in the ruins, followed by Vethrakis's massive head appearing around a concrete pillar. But instead of approaching as he usually did, the dragon froze when he saw Mrs. Patterson. Maya could practically feel the tension radiating from both her companions. Mrs. Patterson had gone completely still, her face pale but determined, while Vethrakis held himself in a defensive posture that made his size and power undeniably clear. "It's okay," Maya said, addressing both of them. "Mrs. Patterson is a friend. She helps animals, all kinds of animals. She wants to help you too." Vethrakis's intelligent eyes moved from Mrs. Patterson to Maya and back again. Slowly, deliberately, he began to make the linguistic sounds that Maya had come to recognize as his attempt at communication. Mrs. Patterson's intake of breath was audible. "My dear God," she whispered. "It really is trying to talk." Maya nodded and moved closer to Vethrakis, who lowered his head to receive the food she had brought. As she fed him, she kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation, introducing Mrs. Patterson and explaining that she was there to help. "The muscle definition suggests a primarily carnivorous species," Mrs. Patterson murmured, studying Vethrakis with professional eyes. "But the jaw structure indicates omnivorous capability. The bone protrusion here suggests severe protein deficiency, and the scale condition indicates possible vitamin deficiencies as well." Vethrakis turned his great head toward Mrs. Patterson as she spoke, and Maya could see him processing the clinical tone and terminology. "Can you help him?" Maya asked. "With proper nutrition, possibly. But Maya, a creature this size would need massive amounts of food. We're talking about several pounds of protein daily, plus whatever plant matter his system requires. That's far beyond what the two of us can manage quietly." As if understanding the gist of their conversation, Vethrakis began to speak. Not the random sounds he had made before, but deliberate, structured sentences in his own language. He spoke for several minutes, his tone varying from what sounded like explanation to pleading to something that might have been storytelling. When he finished, both humans were silent. There had been no mistaking the intelligence behind those words, the complex grammar and emotional nuance. "He's trying to tell us something important," Maya said. "Something about where he came from, maybe. Or why he's here." Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "Maya, I think it's time to involve your parents. Your father is a xenobiologist. This is exactly the kind of situation his training prepared him for. And your mother's work in agricultural engineering might be crucial for understanding his nutritional needs." Maya's stomach clenched. "But what if they want to study him? What if they call the government? Your parents are good people, Maya. They'll put Vethrakis's welfare first, especially if we present this properly." Mrs. Patterson moved slightly closer to the dragon, who watched her approach with cautious curiosity. "Besides, look at him, dear. He's weakening faster than we can help him. Without proper intervention, he'll die regardless of our good intentions." Maya looked at Vethrakis and saw the truth in Mrs. Patterson's words. Despite their efforts, he seemed frailer than he had even yesterday. His great head was resting more heavily on the concrete, and she could see a tremor in his limbs that spoke of a body consuming itself for energy. "Vethrakis," Maya said softly, "I want to bring my parents to meet you. They're smart people who study alien life, and they might be able to help you better than we can, but I need you to trust me." The dragon's eyes focused on her with obvious effort. He made a sound that Maya had learned meant understanding, then began to speak again in his own language. This time, his words were directed specifically at Mrs. Patterson. "I think he's trying to tell her something about his condition," Maya said. "Maybe something medical?" Mrs. Patterson approached even closer, close enough to examine Vethrakis without touching. "The breathing pattern is definitely labored. Possible respiratory distress from prolonged starvation, and these markings along the neck." She paused, studying a pattern of scars that Maya hadn't noticed before. "These look deliberate. Maya, I don't think this is natural starvation. I think someone, or something, did this to him." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "You mean he was hurt on purpose?" "I think he was imprisoned, possibly for a long time. These marks are consistent with restraints, and the muscle atrophy suggests prolonged immobility." Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. "Maya, Vethrakis isn't just hungry, he's a refugee. And that changes everything. The walk back to Maya's house felt different this time. Instead of the excited nervousness she had felt bringing Mrs. Patterson to meet Vethrakis, Maya now carried a weight of responsibility that seemed almost too heavy to bear. If Vethrakis had escaped from somewhere, if someone had deliberately harmed him, then helping him might put all of them in danger. But looking back at the dragon's trusting eyes, Maya knew she couldn't abandon him now. Whatever risks lay ahead, she was committed to seeing this through. They found Maya's parents in the laboratory that had been set up in their home's basement. Dr. Chen was examining soil samples under a microscope, while Elena worked on genetic modifications to local plant species. They looked up with surprise as Maya and Mrs. Patterson descended the stairs together. "Mrs. Patterson, this is unexpected," Dr. Chen said with a smile. "Is everything all right?" "James, Elena," Mrs. Patterson began carefully. "Maya has made a discovery that I believe requires your immediate attention. Something that falls directly within your areas of expertise." Maya took a deep breath. "Dad, you always told me that if I found any new species, I should report it immediately. Well, I found one. And it's intelligent. And it's dying." The next hour was a blur of questions, explanations, and careful preparation. Dr. Chen's scientific excitement was tempered by obvious concern for Maya's safety, while Elena immediately began calculating nutritional requirements based on Maya's description of Vethrakis' size and condition. "If this creature is as large as you describe," Elena said, "and if it's been starving for weeks or months, we'll need to be very careful about refeeding. Too much too fast could actually kill it." "Refeeding syndrome," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "I've seen it in large mammals. The body becomes unable to process sudden increases in nutrition." Dr. Chen gathered his portable field equipment while Elena packed carefully measured portions of high-protein supplements that had been developed for the colony's livestock. Maya watched her parents work with a mixture of relief and apprehension. They were taking this seriously, treating Vethrakis as a patient rather than a specimen. But she could see the scientist's gleam in her father's eyes. That meant he was already thinking about publications and research protocols. "Dad," Maya said as they prepared to leave, "Vethrakis isn't just some animal we found. He's a person. He has thoughts and feelings, and he's been hurt by someone. We can't just study him." Dr. Chen paused in his preparations and knelt down to Maya's eye level. "Sweetheart, I understand what you're telling me, and I promise you that if this creature is truly intelligent, he'll be treated with all the respect and protection we would give any sentient being. But we also need to understand what we're dealing with, for his safety as much as ours." The return trip to the industrial district was tense. Maya led the group through the ruins, hyper-aware of every sound and shadow. She had brought new people to Vethrakis' hiding place, and she wasn't sure how he would react to strangers carrying strange equipment. But when they reached the collapsed factory, Vethrakis was waiting for them. He had positioned himself in clear view, his massive form impossible to miss. Maya realized he had made a deliberate choice to trust her judgment. Dr. Chen's sharp intake of breath was the only sound as the group approached. Even prepared by Maya's descriptions, seeing Vethrakis in person was overwhelming. The dragon's sheer size and obvious intelligence made it impossible to think of him as anything other than a person. "Incredible." "Doctor," Chen whispered. "The cranial capacity alone suggests intelligence potentially exceeding human norms. And the structural sophistication." He trailed off as Vethrakis turned to look directly at him. For a long moment, human and dragon studied each other. Then Vethrakis spoke, his words careful and deliberate, in what was unmistakably a greeting in his own language. Dr. Chen responded instinctively in the same formal tone, speaking in Mandarin. It was clearly the wrong language, but the intent was unmistakable. Vethrakis tilted his head, considering, then switched to heavily accented but recognizable English. "You are Maya's father?" The effect on the adult humans was electric. Mrs. Patterson had suspected Vethrakis' intelligence, but hearing him speak English with such clarity drove home the reality of what they were dealing with. "Yes," Dr. Chen managed. I am James Chen. Maya asked me to help you. Maya, Vethrikis said, his great head turning toward her, spoke truth. You help me? We'll do everything we can, Elena said, stepping forward with the carefully prepared supplements. But we need to understand your condition better. May I examine you? What followed was the most surreal medical consultation Maya had ever witnessed. Elena and Mrs. Patterson worked together to assess Vethrikis's condition, while Dr. Chen documented everything with his equipment. Vethrikis submitted to their examination with patient dignity, occasionally offering information in his improving English. I was held, he said at one point, when Mrs. Patterson asked about the restraint marks. Long time. In place of metal and pain. They wanted to know about my people. Who held you? Dr. Chen asked gently. Vethrikis's expression darkened. Collectors. They take rare things, sell to highest bidder. I was very rare. Maya felt sick. The idea that someone had captured and imprisoned Vethrikis, had deliberately caused his suffering, made her angry in a way she had never experienced before. How did you escape? Elena asked. Ship landed here for fuel. I broke free during stop, but had been hungry so long. Vethrikis's voice trailed off. Was hoping to find food before dying, found Maya instead. Dr. Chen and Elena exchanged glances that Maya didn't miss. If Vethrikis had escaped from slavers who might still be looking for him, the situation was even more complicated than they had realized. Where are your people? Maya asked. Can we contact them? Vethrikis's massive shoulders seemed to slump. Very far. Many star jumps away. I do not know if I can ever return. The weight of Vethrikis's isolation settled over the group like a blanket. He wasn't just lost and starving, he was completely alone. Possibly the only one of his kind on this entire world. Well then, Mrs. Patterson said briskly, breaking the somber mood. We'll just have to make sure you have a place here until we can figure out how to get you home. Elena nodded firmly. The first priority is getting your strength back. Then we can work on the rest. As the adults continued their examination and planning, Maya moved closer to Vethrikis. The dragon lowered his head so she could speak quietly to him. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry someone hurt you, and I'm sorry you're so far from home. Vethrikis studied her with those ancient, intelligent eyes. Maya, he said softly. When I was in the place of metal and pain, I thought much about whether universe contained kindness. You answered that question. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of determination. Whatever it took, whatever risks they had to face, she was going to make sure Vethrikis made it home. 3 weeks later, Vethrikis looked like an entirely different creature. The careful nutrition program that Elena and Mrs. Patterson had developed was working better than anyone had dared hope. His scales had regained their lustrous emerald sheen. His ribs were no longer visible beneath his hide. And most importantly, his eyes held the bright alertness of someone who was truly healing. The abandoned factory had been transformed as well. What had started as a secret refuge had become something like a field research station. Dr. Chen had convinced the colonial administration that he was conducting a long-term study of the local ecosystem, which gave him cover to bring in equipment and supplies. The local governor, Dr. Sarah Kim, was a pragmatic woman who trusted Dr. Chen's judgment and didn't ask too many questions about his sudden need for extensive research resources. Maya visited Vethrikis every day after school, and their conversations had evolved far beyond basic vocabulary. Vethrikis was a gifted linguist, and his English had improved to the point where he could discuss complex philosophical concepts. More importantly, he had begun to trust the growing group of humans who knew about him. The circle of trust had expanded carefully and deliberately. Mrs. Patterson had brought in her friend Dr. Martinez, a retired psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. Elena had quietly recruited 2 of her agricultural assistants when it became clear that feeding Vethrikis required more resources than one family could provide. Each new person was carefully vetted and gradually introduced to the situation. But it was Maya who remained Vethrakis's primary connection to humanity. She was the one he sought out when nightmares of his captivity made it hard to sleep. She was the one who helped him understand human customs and emotions. And she was the one who noticed when his expression grew distant and sad as his physical health improved. "You're thinking about home again," Maya said, one afternoon, as they sat together in the factory's main floor. She had been sketching him while he told her stories about his homeworld, but she had seen his attention drift to the sky visible through the collapsed roof. "Always," Vethrakis admitted. "My people. They must believe I am dead. The collectors took many of us over the years. None ever returned." Maya set down her sketchbook. Over the past weeks, she had learned more about Vethrakis's species, the Vethkari, than probably any human before her. They were an ancient race of scholars and explorers, with a civilization that had mastered space travel when humans were still learning to make fire. But their peaceful nature and small population had made them targets for slavers and collectors who prized rare intelligent species. "Maybe we can find a way to contact them," Maya said. "My dad's been working on understanding the technology in your ship." Vethrakis had told them about the escape pod he had used to flee his captors, though he had crash-landed it several miles from the colony and its technology was largely beyond human understanding. Dr. Chen and a small team of engineers had been studying it quietly, hoping to find some way to send a message to Vethrakis's people. "The distance is vast, Maya," Vethrakis said gently. "Many years of travel, even with faster-than-light technology. And the pod's communication array was damaged in the crash." Before Maya could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles, multiple engines, moving fast through the industrial district. Maya felt her stomach drop as she recognized the sound of military transports. Vethrakis was on his feet instantly, his weakened state forgotten in the face of potential danger. "Hide, Maya," he said urgently. "If these are the collectors—" "It's not collectors, Doctor," Chen's voice called out as he appeared in the factory entrance, but his expression was grim. "It's colonial security. Someone reported unusual activity in this sector." Maya's heart raced. They had been so careful, but 3 weeks of bringing supplies and equipment to a supposedly abandoned area had apparently attracted attention. Governor Kim appeared behind Dr. Chen, followed by 2 security officers in full gear. Maya had met the governor several times at colonial functions, but she had never seen the woman look so serious. "James," Governor Kim said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "I've been hearing some very interesting reports about your research project. Something about unusual energy signatures and unscheduled supply deliveries." Dr. Chen stepped protectively between the newcomers and where Vethrakis stood, but the dragon's massive form was impossible to hide. Governor Kim's eyes widened as she took in the sight of him, but to her credit, she didn't step back or reach for a weapon. "That," she said calmly, "is either the most sophisticated hoax in colonial history, or we have ourselves a first contact situation." "Governor Kim," Maya said, stepping forward before her father could respond. "This is my friend Vethrakis. He's been hurt, and we've been helping him get better." Governor Kim's eyebrows rose slightly at being addressed directly by a 12-year-old, but she nodded solemnly. "I see. And does your friend understand what I'm saying?" Vethrakis lowered his great head in a gesture that had become his customary greeting. "I understand, Governor Kim," he said, his accent now barely noticeable. "Maya and her family have shown me great kindness. I apologize for the deception, but we feared the consequences of premature disclosure." The governor was quiet for a long moment, studying Vethrakis with the careful attention of someone making a decision that would affect thousands of people. Finally, she turned to her security officers. "Gentlemen, I'm going to need you to establish a perimeter around this area. No one else gets in without my authorization. And everything you see here is classified under colonial security protocols. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am," both officers responded, though Maya could see the questions in their eyes as they looked at Vethrakis. When they had gone to establish their perimeter, Governor Kim turned back to the group. "All right, Dr. Chen. I think it's time you brought me fully up to speed on this situation." What followed was the most thorough briefing Maya had ever witnessed. "Doctor," Chen explained how Maya had found Vethrakis, how they had gradually built trust and understanding, and what they had learned about his background and the circumstances that had brought him to their world. Governor Kim listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed she was thinking several steps ahead. When Dr. Chen finished, she was quiet for several minutes. "The legal and diplomatic implications of this are staggering," she finally said. "We're talking about the first confirmed contact with an intelligent alien species in human history. The moment this becomes public knowledge, Kepler 442b will become the center of the entire galaxy's attention, which is exactly why we've been so careful about disclosure," Dr. Chen replied. "Vethrakis has already been victimized by those who would exploit him. We wanted to ensure his safety before involving official channels." Governor Kim nodded slowly, then turned to Vethrakis. "I have to ask you directly, what do you want? What outcome would you consider ideal?" Vethrakis considered the question carefully before responding. "I wish to return to my people, if possible. But I understand this may not be achievable. If I must remain here, I would like to do so as a friend of humanity, not as a prisoner or specimen to be studied. And I want him to be safe," Maya added firmly. "He's not some thing to be displayed or sold. He's a person." Governor Kim smiled slightly at Maya's fierce protectiveness. "I can see why Vethrakis chose to trust you, Maya. You have good instincts about what matters." Over the next several hours, Governor Kim made a series of decisions that would reshape the colony's future. She authorized the creation of a formal first contact protocol team. With Dr. Chen as its head, she ordered the construction of proper facilities where Vethrakis could live comfortably while remaining secure. Most importantly, she decided that news of Vethrakis's presence would be carefully controlled and released only when they were prepared for the consequences. But it was her final decision that surprised everyone. "Maya," she said, as the afternoon drew to a close, "I'm appointing you as Vethrakis's official cultural liaison. You understand him better than anyone else here, and he clearly trusts you completely. If we're going to do this right, we need that perspective." Maya felt a surge of pride and responsibility. "What does that mean?" "Exactly. It means that any decisions about Vethrakis's welfare go through you first. It means you'll be part of all planning discussions. And it means that your opinion carries weight in how we proceed." Governor Kim's expression was serious. "This is a big responsibility, Maya. Are you ready for it?" Maya looked at Vethrakis, who was watching the conversation with obvious interest. She thought about that first day when a starving dragon had lowered himself to ask a human child for food, and about all the trust and friendship that had grown from that moment. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." As the weeks turned into months, the reality of first contact began to settle into routine. Vethrakis thrived in his new environment, which had been designed with input from him about his species' needs and preferences. He spent his days working with Dr. Chen's team, sharing knowledge about Vethkari science and culture, while also learning about human civilization. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen's team finally managed to repair the communication array in Vethrakis's escape pod. The technology was still largely beyond human understanding, but Vethrakis was able to guide them through the process of sending a message to his homeworld. The response, when it came 3 months later, changed everything. Maya was with Vethrakis when the signal arrived. They had been working together on a translation project, converting Vethkari historical texts into English, when the communication array suddenly came to life with a complex series of tones and harmonics. Vethrakis went completely still as he listened, his massive form trembling with emotion. When the message finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Vethrakis," Maya said softly. "What did they say?" "They thought I was dead," Vethrakis said, his voice thick with emotion. "My clutch mother. My bond siblings. They mourned me. But now—" He turned to look at Maya, with eyes that sparkled with tears. "They're coming, Maya. My people are sending a ship to bring me home." Maya felt a complex mix of joy and sadness. She was happy for Vethrakis, thrilled that he would be reunited with his family. But she was also going to miss him terribly. "How long?" she asked. "2 of your years," Vethrakis replied. "The journey is long. Even with our fastest ships, 2 years." Maya would be 14 when Vethrakis left, nearly grown up. But she would treasure every day of that time. The news of the approaching Vethkari ship sent ripples through the colonial administration and, inevitably, reached the wider human community. Governor Kim's careful information management had kept the secret for months, but the arrival of an alien vessel couldn't be hidden. The reaction was everything they had feared, and more. Scientists and diplomats arrived from Earth and the other colonies. Media representatives demanded access. Various groups with their own agendas tried to insert themselves into the situation, but through it all, Maya remained Vethrakis's constant companion and advocate. She sat in on diplomatic meetings and scientific briefings, always making sure that Vethrakis was treated as a person rather than a curiosity. She helped him navigate human politics and customs, while he taught her about the vast community of intelligent species that existed beyond Earth's small corner of the galaxy. The day the Vethkari ship arrived was bittersweet. Maya stood with Vethrakis as the elegant vessel settled onto the landing field that had been prepared outside the colony. The ship was beautiful in a way that human technology couldn't match, all flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shimmer with their own light. When the airlock opened and Vethrakis's people emerged, Maya finally understood what he had been missing. The Vethkari moved with a grace that was entirely their own, and the reunion between Vethrakis and his family was so emotionally powerful that Maya found herself crying without shame. But the Vethkari hadn't come just to retrieve Vethrakis. They had come to meet the humans who had shown such kindness to one of their own. The formal first contact ceremonies lasted for days, but it was the quiet moments that Maya treasured most, sitting with Vethrakis and his clutch mother, while they shared stories, or watching Vethkari youngsters play games with human children. When it came time for farewells, Vethrakis knelt down to bring his great head level with Maya's. "You gave me life, Maya Chen," he said softly. "Not just food for my body, but hope for my spirit. The universe is vast and often cruel, but it also contains people like you who choose kindness over fear. That is a lesson my people will remember." Maya hugged Vethrakis's massive snout, breathing in his familiar ozone scent one last time. "Will I see you again? The stars are no longer barriers between us," Vethrakis promised. "My people know the location of this world now, and we know the character of its inhabitants. There will be trade, cultural exchange, friendship between our species, and I will return to visit, if you would like that." "I would like that very much," Maya said. As the Vethkari ship lifted off, carrying Vethrakis back to his home among the stars, Maya stood with her parents and watched until it disappeared into the afternoon sky. Governor Kim approached the family as the crowd began to disperse. "Maya," she said, "I have a proposition for you. The Vethkari have invited a human delegation to visit their homeworld next year. They specifically requested that you be part of that delegation. Are you interested?" Maya thought about Vethrakis somewhere among the stars, heading home to share stories about the humans who had helped him. She thought about all the other species he had mentioned, the vast community of intelligent life that was waiting to be discovered. "Yes," Maya said without hesitation, "I'm very interested." As she walked home with her parents, Maya reflected on how much her life had changed since that first afternoon, when she had shared her lunch with a starving dragon. She had learned that the universe was bigger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. She had learned that kindness could bridge any gap, even between species separated by millions of years of evolution. But mostly, she had learned that sometimes the most important moments in history began with the simplest acts of compassion. A child sharing her food. A dragon lowering himself to ask for help. Two different species learning to trust each other. In the growing dusk, Maya could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere among them, Vethrakis was heading home, carrying with him proof that humanity could be trusted, that humans chose to help, rather than exploit when confronted with someone in need. It was a good message to send to the stars, and Maya knew it was just the beginning of humanity's true journey into the larger universe, not as conquerors or exploiters, but as friends to all who needed help, regardless of how different they might seem. The starved dragon had found food. But more than that, he had found family among the humans of Kepler 442b, and in return, he had given humanity something precious beyond measure, the knowledge that they were not alone, and that their capacity for kindness could resonate across the vast spaces between worlds. Maya smiled as she looked up at the stars, already planning what she would say when she saw Vithrakis again. There would be so much to talk about, so much to learn from each other. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was ready to explore it with open hearts and helping hands. After all, they had learned from a wise dragon that sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when to ask for help, and the greatest honor was being trusted enough to provide it.